I'm loving that you have this attitude and this, I've got the feeling that we'll have a great time. We're already recording, Aaron, so welcome
Great.
to the show.
Here we are.
Next to nothing about the show, you've been introduced to me by our mutual friend, Greg Scown, of Text Expander fame. And as I mentioned, I like to have these conversations for the first time, or I don't like having certain conversations that they should have been a podcast episode. And the second time you have them, they're not as good. And you said, let's do it. And you're one of the very first people to accept that. Not the first, but I'm having the feeling that we'll have a good time.
People decline?
Not yet. I haven't had that. But because I started doing this before my paternity leave, I only recorded 3 episodes this way, right? And they went really well. I would say like the success rate was good. They haven't been published yet. But I'm fairly confident that I will keep doing this in the future. So thank you for agreeing to this unknown kind of
it's a
proposal.
Fun and new way to think about how podcasts might happen, and also how introductory conversations might happen. So we're having this one for posterity.
There's 2 things that will make this happen more interesting for people. The first one is like, this is not a kind of content that you usually see. Like most podcasts are I don't know if you're a podcast person. I am.
I love me some podcasts. Yeah.
I've come to the realization most podcasts are very scripted. They have the same people, that they are like all in the same circles, and they follow the same kind of structure, like dropping some bangers in the beginning, then some smooth transition to the conversation, then every 10 minutes or something like a big headlines or so, like a clickbaity kind of content, then, crisis towards the end, or like the worst moments, lowlights of the company, and then the inspirational story towards the end, right?
Well,
so it feels
this
like
time I only kind of know what we're going to talk about.
Exactly. And so precisely that's why I want to do it. The second is I like to give voice to other kind of companies. Not like usually you see like everybody's shooting for, I want to have like the CEO of a Stripe, the CEO of Facebook, the CEO of whatever, like the big names, right? Or companies right after an exit, right?
Yeah.
And I find that I learn more from companies like yours when I listen to podcasts than from, because at the very end of the day, I think that the takeaways are more practical from people who are like 1 or 2 steps above you, not 10 steps. Like, what can I learn from Elon Musk?
Most of us are running average companies, right? Maybe not average in terms of, most of us are running average companies in every way. That's the nature of average, right? And we really are, the challenge is not how do I become Facebook? It's how do I become the next step? That's it. It's a small increment that we need to accomplish. Always, right? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Exactly. So, Aaron, I have a lot of questions for you. To give some context to the audience, that issue I wrote a couple of months back, maybe even 3 months back, was at MarsBased, we're hitting 30 people, right? Right now, for the first time in history. For the first 10 years, we used to hire 2 to 3 people at a time, which is something very organic, very feasible for a company that's small, boutique, very artisanal, if you will. And last year, we decided to take it a notch up, right? And said, okay, we're going to hire 6 people, see what happens. We've hired 8. We're in the process of hiring 2 more people before the end of the year. And I felt like a lot of things were trembling in the company. They were not bad necessarily, but things were shaky for a while. We've had to stabilize the company way more, put in more effort than in previous years, because with 2 people, like, we'll do this here, we'll do this there. You hire 1, 6 months, the next person. Now, in February, we hired 4 people at the same time. And that was big for us. Probably not as big for companies you work for. I've seen Microsoft on your website and a few other big clients. But in companies like us, it feels like it resembles the situation Text Expander had in the day. And so I wonder, how do you actually work for companies like the size of Microsoft and companies like MarsBased? Like, is the playbook similar or is it very different?
It's similar because Microsoft may be a giant corporation, and we didn't serve the giant corporation. We served a team at Microsoft. We served a team at Medtronic. So, people talk about, if a VP at Microsoft has an organization. This is my organization within that behemoth. And frankly, most of our clients are companies in the 30 to 1,000 people range. So the Microsofts and the Medtronics and those are much rarer outings for us.
30 people, 30 to 1,000 is like quite a big range. Like the drop down of company size usually comes in smaller.
We're working with a team, and then maybe we're working with a broader base, having begun with one team as a pilot. Then we're rolling out the same tools and techniques for a broader base of people. And what we're doing at any given time is helping leaders create environments and giving people the skills that are required to be effective with other people. It's hard to be effective with people. We are funny creatures, and at times unpredictable, at times really reactive. So there are a lot of skills that need building, and it doesn't matter whether there are 50,000 people in your organization or 5. It's the same skills.
How do you sell these kind of services? Like I find it extremely hard, maybe not extremely hard, but like pretty hard to sell bespoke development to companies. Like companies of all sizes, like you work for companies the likes of Microsoft, and startups and scale-ups and public organizations and NGOs. But selling something like bespoke development when half of the world just buys fucking WordPress and that's it is very difficult. But when Greg introduced me to your company, I thought like, wow, this kind of consulting of like company culture and team organization, like fixing this kind of stuff, of course everyone needs it, but must be a really hard sell from the outside perspective.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the important shifts, and we've been in business just 1 year less than you. One of the important shifts that I made, it has been to some degree, and an important way to stop trying to sell it. So, for example, a CEO was introduced to me by the leader of his peer group. He said, "Oh, given the challenge you're having, you should talk to Aaron." And he said, "I've got great people on my front lines and I've got great people managing them. And I don't understand why all these great people are at each other's throats all the time." And so rather than sell him the fix, I asked him some questions. And I learned that each of these managers, who was really well hired and well selected for a commitment and an integrity that had them working hard to drive performance, each of those managers was managing 30 people, 20 people. So they had an awful large number of direct reports. And I said, well, the research shows that that's just too many people. And he said, well, let me try breaking it down and, have them managing 8 to 10 people instead. And they stopped being at each other's throats because these managers had the time to build strong enough relationships to withstand the pressure of them working hard to drive performance. And so he got a little free insight and didn't need us. I find that when I help people with the easy stuff, not that that's easy, but the insight is easy, we get work. He's introduced me to people who needed our
work for this company then.
Not for his company. We didn't get work from his company, but I have had introductions from him that did lead to work. And there are a number of stories like that where, we're maybe moving down the sales path we discover some insight that's going to really transform things for them. And not that everything is fixed, but enough is fixed that the priority drops for working with us to under something else. And what goes around comes around. So some of those folks do come back and say, okay, now this has risen to a priority level again, where we actually need some intensive work, and we get busy.
And people will
But it's
not
always
remember what you
conversation.
told them.
Sorry?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I broke you off. Go ahead.
I was just saying it's always conversations. Every month and a half or so, I have I call it a CEO's bull session, and I invite a bunch of people and we talk about some particular topic of interest. Like in a couple weeks, I'm going to be running a bull session with CEOs about how to have a strategic retreat with your leadership team that doesn't just waste time and money. And we have a conversation, and I'm not necessarily the expert in the room, though I have some insight about that. I facilitate a conversation, and because I'm building relationships and offering value and not clawing after people, people lower their guard, and I eventually see an opportunity to say, would you like help with that?
I see a lot of parallelisms in what you do and what we do, right? I think I understand that you sort of do, like, you probably don't like the sales word the same way I don't like it. We do some kind of consultative process. I don't know if that's the right word. Bear in mind that I'm not native in English, but in which, like, you're introduced to somebody, they've got a problem, you just go there with no intention to sell. If you sell, great. But the first intention is to go there, listen to what the other person has got in store for you. Like, they've got this problem, they've got this. And I just go there into the meeting, try to solve the problem. And I am always very clear. We might not be the right fit for you. Like, might be that you need this other technology, that you will need probably a cheaper company. Maybe you can do it in-house. You don't need MarsBased for nothing. But they think, like, most people are approached all the time by people who are trying to sell very hard, right?
Yeah.
So by having this sort of relaxed and chill conversation, I sense their barriers coming down. And that's where perhaps a more experienced and better salesman will be like, go, now I'm jumping for the throat.
Right.
Not myself. Sometimes I just leave the conversation there and say, okay, now I fix your problem, or talk to this other person. Like, oh, no, you're not going to sell anything to me. No, people will not remember what you told them, what you did for them. They will remember how you made them feel. And if you made them feel comfortable, they will eventually come back.
Right. And I think I've gone back and forth on a pendulum swing in some ways over the course of my career as in sales. And I don't really mind the word sales. But I've definitely been that clingy, desperate, trying to get your business guy. And then I've swung too far to the other side and just been like, it's all good, and maybe, like, you tell me, and to that point, and the more mature I get, and the more detached from the outcome I get, whether it's the outcome of making the sale or the outcome of whether or not you are offended by me, and focus on what I think puts me in the middle, which is service. There's also something horrible about knowing, okay, it's time for you, the salesperson, to ask me to buy. And in fact, like, I've come to you for your leadership, and now I've felt like we were making progress along the way, and all of a sudden the progress has stalled, and I'm not the expert here. I've come to you to be my guide, and the progress has stalled. And that's a terrible, uncomfortable place for everybody to be. And so also in my role in selling our services, I try to focus on what is going to serve you best. And sometimes that's saying, all right, it seems like this is a good idea. Am I wrong?
You're not. And actually, my next question was going to be, because I've seen that you also run a podcast and a blog, and content has been perhaps the best and cheapest way to give away some tiny bits of freebies to attract customers, right? But you mentioned that you host these events, private events for CEOs. That is actually also a very good tactic, right? So you just invite them, have a casual conversation, try to sell nothing, but you're in the room. And people, when they get in the room, they get like this small circle of people, like the backstage of a conference or of a big event. That's where the magic happens, right? So the podcast working wonders for us because we're able to share our information freely, share, like we've got the company culture is based on transparency. So we share our revenue numbers, the things we do internally and stuff like that. And people are like, oh, wow, you're giving this away for free. You must be really good at what you do, right? So that builds trust on authority. But jumping into kind of like the subject of what I wanted to cover here today, which is the company culture. We have been one of the loudest companies in Spain to talk about company culture. 15 years ago, no one talked about company culture. Granted, we're not a very company, but I took the idea of company culture from the US, from when I spent a good time there in 2013. And we were very vocal about having a like strong company culture that went beyond like usual startup benefits, not perks, but actual company culture. And since then, in Spain, companies have learned how to do it, right? Back then, company culture was the freaking ping pong table at the office and the free snacks, right? But there's one thing that I don't feel like there's an actual consensus on this, and I fear that the answer to this will be, it's different for every company, but at what point does company culture break?
It depends. And there are patterns. Like you mentioned being right at about 30 people. And 30 people, it's pretty common for the wheels to start to feel like they may be coming off the bus. That's when Text Expander reached out to us, is when they were about 30 people and growing. There is, I think of culture, it's the set of contagious behaviors and attitudes in a community, and a company as a community. And all behavior, guess what? All behavior is contagious. So, you know, as you were talking about it, I was thinking about when I was 18 and I went to a Grateful Dead concert. And, you know, I'd listened to Grateful Dead music before. I'd never been to a Grateful Dead concert. And my behavior was affected by the behavior of all the people around me. If you've never been to a library, you might walk into the library talking loudly, and then pretty quickly you're going to go, I am standing out like a sore thumb. And you're going to get quiet, if only to appreciate and try to understand what have I just come into? And so the reason that I say it depends is that different people's behavior, depending on their forcefulness, depending on their charisma, depending on how they spend their time, may be more or less contagious. And so I think there are some highly charismatic leaders that can keep a culture on track according to what track they're trying to create, more than others. There are other leaders that I've worked with where, you know, there are 10 people in their organization and the culture starts to rattle a little bit because the force of their personality doesn't carry that level of contagion. And one other thought for you is, you talked earlier about growing incrementally, one person at a time. You know, you bring one person in, and that's one person among 15. So they're the 16th person. And so there are 15 people with this culture contagion. And then that one person is likely to be kind of absorbed into that culture. And if you're 20 people and you hire 4 all at once, Well, now all of a sudden, those 4 have a more forceful effect contagion-wise. And I'm just using the word contagion neutrally. It could be that they have an incredibly positive effect on your culture. It could be that they have a negative effect on your culture. It could be that their effect on your culture is neutral, and still it does change things. I don't know if that answered your question.
It does, because I've got the feeling that most companies having cultural problems is because they hit hypergrowth, right?
Mhm.
And that's when they start hiring because they're running out of time. They're most likely VC backed. Therefore, they've got 12 months to 18 months left of runway. And they have to make a lot of experiments
Yeah.
trying to reach product market fit. That means we don't have a lot of people. We don't have enough people. We have to hire a lot, even though we know that most of these people will have to be fired if things go south or if the company just goes bust in 12 months, right?
Yeah.
But they hire them anyways at the cost of company culture. And most problems that companies face in these situations are caused by overhiring than, for what I understand, is company breaking, right? They actually break it on purpose, right? In this, I don't know if you are of the same opinion or not, but I think that's a common trend I've seen in VC backed companies.
Yeah. I do think that the focus of VC is not necessarily conducive to things like sustainability. And there's some value to, well, let's not lose slowly. Let's not bleed to death slowly. Excuse me. Let's actually take some risks and see whether this thing is viable or not viable. So I think there are there are some narrow slices here, some thin slices between what is and what isn't wise. And any risk, you're going to break things. A lot of us spend marketing money, for example, that if this marketing money doesn't work, we're going to be in trouble cash flow wise. And one of the mistakes that I made early on was to not spend money on marketing. And that meant that we bled to death more slowly.
And the other thing that I think really affects the erosion of company culture is the length of the tenure of the employees in the companies, right? In startups, high-growth companies, technology in particular, a lot of companies have got an average tenure, or a lot of people, have got an average tenure of 1.5 years in the companies, right? Difficult to keep a company culture around if your employee attrition is 33%. That means that every 3 years, 100% of your employees change.
Yeah.
And how can you keep this consistent over the years? In our case, for instance, we've got the other side of the spectrum. Believe it or not, most of our people are 7 to 10 years into the company, which is really weird. People don't leave our company. That either means that we paid very well, or we just they don't get tired of us, right? At the same time, while that sounds something very good for culture, it comes with a certain set of struggles as well, which is long-term motivation, right? Or people getting older and reskilling them and stuff like that. Is this also sort of the challenges that you also encounter in companies, or you've never seen a company with this kind of problem?
No, absolutely. Because, as trite as it may be, I don't remember who it was who originally said, "What got you here won't get you there." And so there are aspects of culture that may be perfect for having gotten you where you are. And now it's that same culture that may be holding you back. And culture is habitual. And so if you've got long tenure and now you need a change in culture, for example, maybe you've been a move fast, break things culture, and you've still got move fast, break things habit, when you've actually figured out what works. and you've become impatient with what works because it's not the personality that your culture has developed to be. Now it's time to perhaps become a little bit more conservative. So there are cultural habits that you need to change. Can that happen with the same people? Of course, people quit smoking and quit drinking all the time. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy.
How about I've got the feeling that trying to be an external consultant or expert or either advisor, I don't know how you guys call yourselves, when you come into the company, you know that um, people tend to change their behavior when they know they're being analyzed or assessed, right?
Yeah.
So if you come into a company with certain challenges and they'd like you to come in and assess what's going on, assess what works, what doesn't, and you start joining their Slack. I don't know what's your methodology, your playbook. So you let me know here. But I'm assuming that somehow you try to blend in or get to know the team or inspect certain things and whatnot. And the team might kind of like raise an eyebrow at the very least and say like, oh, I think there's something going on. I'm gonna start working a little bit more these days. I'm gonna stretch the hours a little bit more and stuff like that. How do you do it? How do you do it so that it doesn't affect not the team's performance, the team's actual like how they act?
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you talk to Greg, and I watched your podcast with Greg from Text Expander, one of the things he mentioned that I think he said it saved them untold waste is a simple tool, a simple piece of vocabulary, be obvious. So while we absolutely do diagnose the cultures we're coming into, also we just recognize that there are certain principles of effective communication and collaboration, effective leadership that are universal and difficult, and it's so difficult, in fact, that they're aspirational. So clarity of communication, that is difficult. It's universal and it is aspirational. I'm a pretty clear communicator, and I still need to become ever more clear. So wherever you are, if we can improve your effectiveness at clear, consistent communication, and be obvious is a tool and a bit of language once you understand what it means, that makes even the most effective communicators even more effective. So we can give you tools, we can give you techniques, and we can give you skills that are going to make your culture a more effective culture, regardless of where you are now. We don't necessarily need to understand. So that's one piece. And then the other piece is, if we hang out with you long enough, and we hung out with Text Expander long enough, the facade that you put up is going to become tiresome and you will become exhausted, and the facade will go away, which we've all experienced. Anybody who's ever hired somebody has experienced this, right? That somebody comes in, they put on a certain amount of effort, they put on a certain mask,
100%.
and that lasts for a couple of months, maybe, right? With the people who have the greatest endurance, and then you start to see their true colors. And sometimes their true colors are equally or even perhaps more wonderful. And sometimes you just go, yeah, great. Well, I'm glad you're getting to know more, because your effectiveness in this role is increasing because you know more about the role, even as your effort level, your willingness and endurance may be dropping.
But reading between the lines, that means that you've got to work for a long period, right? So when you come into the companies, you don't just go there for a few weeks. It's probably like a 6 months project or something like that.
It
How do you
depends.
actually work with the companies?
Sometimes it's a 6-month project. Sometimes it's as it was with Text Expander. I think we worked with them for 18 months.
Wow.
Sometimes, as we worked with SOG Knives, we worked with SOG Knives for one afternoon. And we gave them tools, we gave them an experience. Everything that we do in terms of upskilling a team is experiential, because we all know enough generally to be more effective. The question is, do we have the experience to put our faith and lean into these things that we know. And so we gave them some of the same tools that we gave that we gave Text Expander, like Be Obvious. And the new leader, the new CEO of SOG Knives was disciplined enough that he said, all right, this is our new SOP. And then tactical enough that he took over from there, and they grew those skills from the principals themselves. So some of our clients are very short term, and some of them are longer term.
How about the other obstacle I think that a process like this or a company like yours might face, and we experience it firsthand, is being remote, right? I don't know if you do on-site projects. I take it that most of it is remote because I'm seeing your clients, they come from everywhere. In our case, we've never had an office, and that in and of itself is already a challenge because, as you know it as an expert in a company culture, remote environment, hard remote environments, they really struggle to consolidate company cultures. We take longer. And that's a fact, just because we don't spend enough time together. But coming into as an external observer or as a consultant, an advisor, I don't know if that the company culture is also diluted there. You can sense it there as as this third party coming into the company and saying like, oh, I'm not seeing where things are going. I don't understand everything because I'm not exactly in the office. And remote environments are more difficult to work with, in your opinion?
Yeah, it's harder. Before COVID, in fact, we didn't do remote work. We just said,
wow.
We just said, let us help find you something, because the way that we train and really any behavior change is gonna generally require some level of training. The way we train is so experiential. We didn't at first see a way to do it effectively online. Then COVID came along, and we said, all right, well, we better figure this out. And we spent some really intensive time going, all right, well, how do we deliver this remotely? And thankfully, we met Philip and Greg of Text Expander after COVID began, so that when they said, they were entirely remote, can we work with you? And we said, yes, we have figured out how to do that. So it is a different challenge, because, as I said, culture is contagious behaviors and attitudes. I can't give you a cold from here, right? So there are contagions that are harder. In particular, I can cultivate a particular image of behaviors for you while we're on Zoom, or that are harder to maintain for an entire day in the office together. So I can fake it more easily and then go and be otherwise. Also, the behaviors that you want me to adopt are harder to instill in me because I'm not seeing you as much. I'm not around the behaviors that you want, which is why another reason why a big part of our focus is in training. Most people want to do the best that they can. Almost everybody's doing the best that they can. And in large measure, it's about skill. I'm not going to get on a unicycle because I am afraid I'm going to fall off it. But if I have the training to stay on a unicycle and I grow the confidence, then I will happily get on a unicycle. Similarly, a lot of the most effective tools of communication, things like listening, patience, allowing silence, those are scary until you've had the training. to see that they work. And then you can have the confidence in the same way you're willing to get on that unicycle.
That is actually very good segue for my next question, which is, what is your playbook then? Because let me explain. We recorded 5 episodes with an M&A boutique, dissecting how they work, right? That's a pretty, like, the M&A industry is not very transparent. And so most people don't know like how these companies work, what is required to get involved with these kind of companies, what sort of transactions, fees, how does an NDA work, and non-compete, like non-shopping agreement and stuff like that. Similarly, we are recording right now, and this week's we're recording a How to Build an Agency series for the MarsBased podcast, based on our experience. But we don't know how your kind of company operates. So how does the typical engagement look like? Like, is there, I suppose, an NDA, then you give a quote, or is it a retainer? How do you guys work?
We want to understand where you are as well as we can and where you're trying to get, right? So it's kind of like if you were to call up a physical trainer and say, hey, I need physical training. They're going to go, okay, well, what are your goals? Oh, you want to lose weight? Well, how heavy are you? Right. So there's that kind of, let's learn what is the origin and what's the destination. Okay, now we can think about plotting a route. So that's step one. Then we agree, okay, we're going to do this much of that route together. Very often, what we think about is kind of 3 aspects of a healthy culture. One is structural, prepare the soil. We have had a number of leaders call us and say, one of our core values here is trust. I'm not experiencing trust. People don't trust each other. They don't trust me. I don't understand what's going on. And I said, well, open your employee handbook to a random page and start reading to me. And there are policies in employee handbooks on every page, and not every employee handbook, most, that say in no uncertain terms, though in different words, we don't trust you as far as we can throw you. So if your core value is trust and your employee handbook says, for instance, and this is one of the most egregious types of policies, when you get back from bereavement leave, bring us an obituary or a death certificate to prove that you actually lost a loved one. If you want trust, you've got to show trust. I went to a parochial high school, religious. You'd think that morals would be an important part of that. And they told us, they told us all day, every day, every time we took a test, we are going to be watching you like hawks. If anybody cheats, you're going to get 0, and it's going to go on your record, and there will be disciplinary action taken. Essentially, they were telling us, y'all are cheaters, so we're going to be watching out for that. Don't do what you do. Everybody cheated. It became a sport. Given their security measures, how are we going to get past them? Then I went to college, and in college there was an honor code, and the professor was not permitted to be in the room while we were taking our exams. They'd give us the exam, they'd answer any questions, and then they were required to leave. And then we wrote a little pledge that said, I've neither given nor received aid during this exam. Essentially, I did this. This is my work. I did not cheat. I did not see or hear about any cheating in the 4 years that I was in college. So people will live up to or down to the expectations that you have from them. So that's one example of prepare the soil. Are the structures correct? Another example we already talked about, great managers, great people on the front lines. Why are they at each other's throats? Because the structure of having so many people report to a single manager is not conducive to a strong relationship. And so there's resentment building, and that's creating problems for you. That's structure. Prepare the soil. Plant the seeds. We have 8 principles of effective communication, collaboration, and leadership that we train teams to understand and implement. Be obvious is one of those. Some of our clients just get 4 of those 8, and we plant those seeds in people's brains and they germinate on their own. So we've come back to clients years later and said, so I'll say something to the CEO like, hey, just to be obvious here. And this has happened more than once that the CEO, I'm thinking about Katie right now. She said, wait, you say be obvious too? Like, we say that. And I said, you remember where you got it? She's like, oh my goodness, 4, 5 years later, she's like, we got that from you. It's just become a part of their vernacular to the extent that they forget that where it came from. That's culture, is we don't even necessarily recognize what it is, where it came from, that it's something we do. It's just how we are. And then the third phase is water the garden. And that is where we help you germinate those principles and give you real tactics. If you think about the seeds and the principles as strategies for effective culture, then the tactics are, for example, we give people a 4-step process for giving effective feedback. 1, 2, 3, 4. You do this, then this, then this, then this. And that points back to it evolves out of those principles. And now you've got specific tactics to employ because the principles and the tactics can reinforce one another.
That sort of, well, no, that actually answers the question of like, how do you guys work in terms of playbook, but in terms of like the contract, how do companies engage with each other, right? Is there the process? Does it look like a free consultation at the beginning, or we come to your office, visit 30 minutes, something like that? Then it's an ongoing agreement. There's a paid gig at the beginning. I don't know, like what would people expect from a process like this? Because we've never had companies like yours on the podcast. So I'm just
so Kitsap Public Utility District, they came to us and they said, here's the issue. And I said, oh, well, it sounds like you don't have a system for this is how we manage people around here. And that seems to me to be maybe the primary issue. You've got a system for how do we create our work tickets, and how do we do procurement, and how do we do hiring? And you've got a system for everything except the care and feeding of your most important asset, the people in your company. So what we want to do is we're going to give you a system for this is how we manage people around here. We'll do a little diagnostic first. We'll plant the seeds, give you these principles, and then we will, over the course of 8 months, also give you and train you in a system of managing people and performance that leads to strong relationships, strong retention, and strong performance. And that was the agreement from the beginning. We just said, all right, we're going to do this significant meal. We've also got something we call the Culture Seed Starter, where we survey the team and measure them on six characteristics of highly effective teams. Things like trust and respect, a focus on results, a willingness and ability to manage conflict, things like accountability, right? We're going to measure your health in a snapshot through a survey. Then we're going to give you these first 4 principles. And then we're going to talk about the results of the survey together and what you as a team want to do about it. And that's as far as we go in this first phase. You may decide that what you want to do about it is entirely DIY, and we'll give you some pointers and send you off to DIY. And some clients who do the Culture Seed Starter see that those 4 principles have given them enough. They decided DIY from there. And some say, okay, we'd like to increase our willingness and ability to manage conflict. We think that's the most important place for us to focus. And we might ask, do you want help with that? And if they do, We have tools for that.
Which brings me to my next question. As you might know, this is a very artisanal process, right? And you as a founder, as you scale your company, you find yourself between a rock and a hard place, finding the balance between I want to sell more, I want to grow the client base. At the same time, the company does a great job because I'm still involved in the projects.
Mm-hmm.
The moment I go hands off, I don't know what that's going to happen, but in our experience, didn't work very well in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you find this balance of I am involved enough in the day-to-day of the projects and overseeing things and like putting the final touches on adding the final layer of quality of your distinctive founding principles and quality, and caring for the growing sales?
For me and my company, it kind of goes like this. So I started over here, and it was,
You mentioned the pendulum, right?
I'm doing it all, right? And it's kind of like, well, that's not working. Let me delegate some of this, and some of that I delegated well enough that I only had to backslide to here, and then the work from here to here is in systematizing this stuff well enough that people who aren't me, can execute. And then also taking my hands off of other stuff where I'm holding things back because other people execute better than I do. And then making new progress, realizing the ways in which it hasn't been effectively systematized, going back, and then working my way forward to systematize and train people more effectively. And so we're kind of slowly creeping our way forward. And then the level of experience and the decade plus of time that I have doing this, there are some parts of what we do that I do better than anybody else. And so there's some dialogue to have with some of our clients about, do you want to pay to take me away from the other stuff that I'm doing? In which case you can pay more and have me, or you can pay a little less and get 90% of the quality.
That's always a very difficult conversation, because most of the times, if you do like us, one of our strongest selling points is like, oh, the founders are involved in the project.
Yeah.
And we are, right? But at a certain point, you're like, I'm not required here because like the company is less complex now. It's been like, for 2 years, and we're moving to this other more complex problem and perhaps more mentally stimulating project, right? And then your natural instinct is not to reduce the fees, right, to the clients, but they see you going away, and are like, oh, why are you going away from the project, right? But we're still always there for anything that just comes up, putting out any fires and stuff like that. So that's why I think people love companies like ours, probably like yours, because founders are still there. We care. Yeah. We're coming up to close to the end of the show, but there's one question we ask to everybody. We've always asked this question, not only in the 5 years of Life on Mars, the MarsBased podcast, but also in the 15 years I've been hosting events, which is, what's been your biggest fuck up, biggest personal fuck up, and work, like professional fuck up, and how much money did it cost to you?
I can't calculate.
It's got to be one of your own.
Yeah.
You have to own it up.
I cannot calculate how much it cost me. And I want to care for good people who are part of this company's history, and without whom the company wouldn't be what it was. I think my biggest fuck up has been not believing people when they tell me who they are.
That sounds interesting.
That there's people saying this is what my priority is, and they have skills, they have abilities that I lusted after, and I wanted those skills and felt like I couldn't get where I wanted to go without them, and then make excuses for the behaviors that and the actions that compromised either my integrity or the well-being and health of the company, our ability to adapt and grow with the demands of the market, and still kind of lusting after those skills and abilities and being scared of what would happen if I were to just say, I love this. This isn't working. And if this is part of the package, then we're going to need to figure out a way to go our separate ways, because I can't be around this, can't have this in the company, can't see the future being as bright as it needs to be if we keep going in the directions that this insists upon. So that's my answer for however
No,
clear or muddy it may be.
no, it's good. Usually people try to give me very cliche crap like I hired the wrong person or
Yeah.
I took too long to fire that person and stuff like that, right? Sometimes we get I set the office on fire. That was good. Like somebody at Amazon set an office on fire. Somebody deleted the production database of like entire record company on like a big launch day. Some are really freaking epic, but like some of them, they try to get away with these sort of
Yeah.
small things. Yours is much more philosophical, if you will. But given that, like in the work or the field that you do, it's I understand that you can't allow for fuck ups in judging people, right, or in trusting people, because at the very end of the day, culture is built with people. So if they
Uh,
are not sincere to you, or you're not able to read between the lines, you're not doing a great job.
I would adjust that a little bit. I think
Yeah.
I give myself a lot of grace around trusting the wrong people. Where I hope I have learned my lesson is in not continuing to throw good money after bad. The sunk cost fallacy. We're going, I made an error. Mea culpa. Let me shift directions. And instead, continuing to try to put lipstick on a pig.
Okay, gotcha. And I feel like I have committed the same mistake multiple times, but also because I have a certain tendency of working with friends, and sometimes you just don't want to hurt them.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, I'll try to, put the lipstick on a pig, as you mentioned, and until that gets to somehow to somewhere acceptable, and then you part ways.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we've been on the same boat here. Many thanks, Aaron. One last question for you, rolling out the red carpet. So how can we help you on the Yes Works? Like with our
Yeah.
community at Life on Mars, MarsBased, is there anything specific you guys are looking for? Any kind of profile you want to hire, some new market you want to tap into,
Well,
something we can do for you?
I'll say this. I really am a man on a mission. This company started almost 12 years ago now, when my wife told me she was pregnant and I was doing work that I loved in a job that I hated. And I just thought, this is bullshit. I don't want to come home and have my daughter see that even though I love my work, I'm exhausted and not because I'm tired, but because I'm truly tapped out and sapped of my life force. I don't want her to think that's even a possibility. I don't want her to relate to her fellow humans, by saying, another day, another dollar, same shit, different day. I hate Fridays. Or I love, TGIF. I hate Mondays. I hate my boss. All that stuff. I do not want my daughter to come up in the work culture that you and I came up in, Àlex. So if you are perplexed by, frustrated by, simply believe that things could be better interpersonally in your company or between your folks and your customers, your folks and your vendors, and you just think that there's got to be a different way. I'd love to talk. If I can help with insight in any way, that's how y'all can help, is help me forward this mission that we, instead of coming together on, I'll never forget the clerk who told me, after just a great job doing, having a great rapport with me, building rapport just in the couple of seconds that I was checking out. She said, I asked, "How are you?" And she said, "I'll be better in a couple hours when I get off." That way that we try to find commonality together is poison. So if I can in any way help us find commonality through the grace of being able to make a contribution through our work, that's a good day for me. So help me have more good days, so that we can all find that commonality together as humans by the grace of being able to do a good work, making a contribution.
That is actually very inspirational. So thank you for sharing. Just a couple of thoughts here. First one is, we've been talking a lot about company culture in this podcast, in our blog and whatnot. This is actually the very first time I feel like I'm having a very informed conversation with somebody who knows their shit about company culture. The second one is bring back the podcast. I feel like all of these sharings, all of these learnings, should be shared on more frequently on a podcast. You've got a great voice, you've got a great setup, fantastic background, and experience. You could fill many books with that. So podcasting, is something very, very useful, and it's a great way to pay forward. So thank you for doing this. Thank you for the opportunity to have this chat together. I feel like I learned a ton, and wishing you continued success.
Well, thank you, Àlex. I do podcasts not infrequently. I have my own podcast, and I'm brought on as a guest every so often. My favorite podcasts are ones like this, where people engage with me in ways that have me saying things I've never said before, surprising myself with new insight into the work that I'm doing. So I'm grateful to you for being present with me in such a way that you bring new stuff out of me. Thank you.